Her from 2013. This movie is obviously starring Joaquin Phoenix, Amy Adams, and the voice of Scarlett Johansson. It was written and directed by Spike Jonze, and the IMDb plot summary. In the near future, a lonely writer develops an unlikely relationship with an operating system designed to meet his every need. So for me, and why this is, I think, Joaquin Phoenix's masterpiece performance, at least for me, is because of the challenge in this movie that he had to do, which a number of things that I think were very difficult. The first one is, like the movie describes, like he falls in love with an operating system, which in this movie is just a voice. It's like Alexa or Siri. So you never see Scarlett Johansson's character, you just hear her voice. So a lot of this movie is Joaquin Phoenix doing these very emotional and very difficult scenes to act completely alone. Like there's no one he can act off of at all. It's just him. He's some, whether it's an extreme close up, a medium shot, it's just Joaquin like unloading on all these incredible emotions. I mean, this movie really does encapsulate so much of like what relationships and human relationships and love and all these things are, which we can get more into the overall film. But again, on the
Hmm.
Joaquin piece, and the second thing is too, it is a weird thing to even think of. And maybe not so much nowadays in 2024, but back in 2013, to think that a person could fall in love with a computer and you feel empathy or understanding for that scenario happening at all without coming across as who's this weird guy. You'll see those shows back in the day where it's like, oh, so this person's in love with his car and like he marries his car. And it's like, that guy's weird and bizarre. Like, I don't get it. Whereas that's sort of what, at least I wouldn't go into this movie and be like, how's this going to work? Like, what do you mean fall in love with a computer? Like, this is just going to be some weirdo that I don't care about. Like, how can you care about a relationship that isn't real? I mean, that's like a lot of these questions this movie's asking, but he makes it work. Like, you really, I mean, this is like a leading man performance too, and like a romance, even though it's just him with a voice. And he's able to bring this empathy and relatability to this character that on paper could be sort of seen as like, who's this weirdo? Like, okay, like I don't care. You're just some weird guy who's like falling in love with a computer. Like, go out there and meet a real person. Like, come on. But I never feel like that at all in watching this movie, and it just sort of unlocks a lot of other things just about the human experience and human condition. But we can get into more of the thoughts of the film in a bit. I'm curious on your thinking of Joaquin's performances. I know you've seen, you've seen this
Yeah.
film too.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing weird about him or the movie or the character at all because A, it's his performance, but also I think the movie very quickly sets you up in this new world, which is not in too much of a distant future. Once again, the mise en scène of this movie is just so powerful that you are on the right away. You don't question it. And it's just so brilliant that things feel familiar, but also just different enough and slightly in the future enough that it doesn't distract from the stuff that might be going on in like a science fictiony kind of movie. So it's just such a fine line of making you believe. But it's Joaquin who really does that in his performance. And we've been talking about the sweetness and vulnerability of his characters and him as a performer. I think this is that piece dialed up all the way. And he's done that a few times in his career.
Hmm.
And I think this one probably is the most successful of all of them. I mean, he's always good, but I
Right.
think the movie sort of serves him right. The character serves him right and rises to the occasion of what he's delivering. That I will never forget that moment of watching this movie the first time when he says that, oh, you've been talking to other people as well.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just so heartbreaking to
Hmm.
see that. And the moments he has like laughing away with the little sort of iBody like thing with her, with the camera swirling, it's powerful, deep, but very simple stuff of just falling in love, and walking around in this lonely place, if you will, and the heartbreak then when that hits you. At that time, I remember watching this movie and being like shocked and surprised by, oh, Joaquin can do this, even though deep down I knew he could do it, but I don't think I'd ever seen him do that. I knew he could do intense and off and weird and all of that stuff. And it's very telling, right? That our two masterpieces are kind of opposite ends of the same kind of through line.
Hmm.
And yet there is connectivity between those two people. And it's authentic. And how many people can do that, first of all? But to that level of mastery and craft. And that's why I mean it when I think about that he's one of the best actors working, probably. And he will always be in the pantheon of the best actors we've ever had, because how
Hmm.
many people can do these two movies? It's pretty incredible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's that sweetness thing you mentioned too. I think really, I mean, this is in a way like the sweetest he can. I mean,
Yeah.
he's playing a romantic lead on his own, though. That's again the thing that just like every time I see this, it's just I care so much about their relationship, but she's
Yeah.
not like she's just the voice. I mean, again, I'm not slagging off. Scarlett Johansson does an incredible job in this movie too,
Amazing.
and a
Yeah.
lot of what she's able to do just through her voice is credit to her as an actress. I think it's just
Yeah.
great. So I'm not trying to diminish what she did, but she's not on the screen. He's more exposed in that sense. So a lot of those scenes that you just talked about when they're in that conversation, he's finding out that she's talking to other people, she's in love with other people, is yes, it's on her voice performance, but just that's just a devastating moment, and just you can see that going through him because he's the only one on the screen. I mean, it's this very big close up of him having to carry the whole thing. It's just incredible performance, and just the film overall too. I just again want to one of my favorite movies. And I think what Spike Jonze is able to do in terms of really getting into what human connection is, what love is. I mean, this covers all phases of a relationship, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then how that changes you into finding the next one. I mean, it seems like
Mhm.
he might have a connection with Amy Adams towards the end of the movie that is more than just friends, which I always sort of like how this movie ends. And both of them too, like Joaquin's character and also Scarlett Johansson's AI, they grow because of their relationship into different people. Like she literally upgrades herself because she's shown this love from Joaquin. So then she loves herself and then is able to go through these upgrades to the point where she can't really relate to him anymore. And that's something that can happen to human context too. Like you
Yeah.
do evolve and like love changes you, and it can change you apart too, in the same way that love can also bring people together, which I think this movie shows both of those things and why it's such a incredible film, and I think one of the best of this century so far in tackling these things through a lens of sci-fi. I mean, it's a sci-fi movie, like you said, but it
Mhm.
doesn't let that get in the way of
Yeah.
the meaning behind the movie.
Yeah. Which is my favorite kind of sci-fi movie. And they
Hmm.
just handled that so well. The look of the movie, the color palette, like so much has sort of been done and said of that. And it's sort of in the culture, if you will, starting this movie. But I have to say, like, he looks so good in this movie, which,
Yeah, he does.
it's just, it's amazing. The mustache and sort of the high-waisted pants and just such a great look for him, I think, which again I was so surprised by when I first saw the movie. I will say though that it's not a movie I revisit a lot or want to. And I was thinking about that during this watch, like, why is that? Because this would be very much up my alley. I like
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised to
romance
hear that.
movies.
Oh, see, and melancholy. This movie's all
Yeah,
about that, and that's like your favorite emotion. So I'm
exact through
surprised.
movies for
Right,
sure.
right.
Yeah,
Through movies.
maybe
Yeah, I don't mean
otherwise
as a
too.
person. As a person, you're the light of the party, but as through movies. Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I have to think more about that from within me as to why is it that I don't come back to this very often. And maybe there is something about the sci-fi aspect, even though it's done in a way where it doesn't date itself very easily because it's in a very distant future, but it
Right.
still feels very relatable. But there's something about, because it's so specific and unique, that before watching the movie, I already know in my head what it looks like and feels like. That the surprise of it is sort of gone in my mind, maybe.
Hmm.
And maybe that's what keeps me at a little bit of a distance. But then when I start watching it, I'm always like, oh, this is just so incredible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this is one of Spike Jonze's best movies. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
come back to it that often either. It's more for just that this movie just deals with almost like too many things that are kind of like hard emotional things to kind of
I
like
think
think
that's
through
true.
your feel through yourself. I mean, again, it's the entire arc of relationship, things like what is the meaning of love? What is the meaning of
Yeah.
human connection? Even that scene I always find so hard when she hires that woman to be her body. And it's like the three
Yeah.
of them involved in this thing, and he thinks it's awkward, and the other woman is kind of thinks it's awkward, and like so does Scarlett Johansson's AI character. And just like there's almost too much emotion going on in those scenes. I just find that scene in particular so hard to watch and just like gut wrenching because of
Yeah.
what's going on between all three of those or two of those people and one of the computer. So it's a hard watch for me in that sense because it is so raw and it does deal with things that are just so real, quote unquote, that it can be tough. And I'm not like again, it is the melancholy tone of it can be a bit much for me sometimes too. But I do come back to it every couple years I'll put it on and just still be enthralled in it. And to your point on the production design and just the costumes and the settings, it doesn't feel dated still. But it
Hmm.
also doesn't feel like a sci-fi movie like Blade Runner or Metropolis or something,
Yeah.
which, those can seem dated. Like, oh, this Blade Runner looks like an 80s version of the future, right? Whereas this movie just feels timeless almost. It's incredible. And in a way, it's sort of, I think, ahead of its time, kind of. Some of the fashion trends, even that you mentioned with Joaquin with those sunglasses or the glasses and the mustache, like that look wasn't as in 2012 when this movie was made or 2013 when this movie was made than it is now. It's almost the,
Yeah.
the real life kind of caught up to what this movie. I mean, how much of that was the movie or just Spike Jones just throwing darts at a wall and some of them stick? But I find that to be the uniqueness about this movie too, because they are able to make it timeless in a way.
Yeah. The other movie I was thinking of this time watching it is Past Lives. It has like a very similar, I mean, of course, they're about love and relationship, but there's something about the texture of the movies
Hmm.
and the music and how they're framed that, yeah, it's hard to put it in words, but they have this sort of like picture box, picture book kind of look to them, but it's also very 3D, just not visually, but also just emotionally. I know you
Mm,
were so in Past Lives, but it made me think of that. So this was also my wild card, and I put this because this movie stands singularly in my mind from Joaquin's performance style or career, if you will, because it's so much on the sweetness side, like we talked about. There's not a bone of him being weird and off and all of the things that we also love about him,
right.
and it's a true romantic, vulnerable, melancholic but sweet performance, and that's why this is my wild card for him.
Yeah, this is a great wild card choice too. And I wonder if because the scenario is kind of weird and offbeat, like this basic premise of the
Right.
film, that he doesn't need to share that burden of being that in the film. He's actually the
Hmm.
opposite of it. He's the most grounded,
Hmm.
realistic. Like you believe this guy could just be a guy. There's nothing kind of a little bit off. The character in The Master, he's not really relatable in that sense. I mean, but I get what he's doing. But with this movie, he's just a normal dude because he doesn't have to be more wacky like he does
Yeah.
in some of these other films. So that is a unique thing that he's able to bring to this. So I like this as a wild card choice too. I think
Yeah.
it works. And actually, Card in the movie he writes cards, greeting cards, right, and letters in
Yeah.
it. So
Also such a genius thing. I'm always like, I have like chuckle or like a smile on my face every time I watch it, and I'm taken back to the first time I watched it of thinking, oh, what a job,
yeah,
and especially in the time and the world that this is set in, it's just such a, yeah, I'm so glad Spike Jonze won screenplay for this because it's such a
hmm,
brilliant screenplay. Like everything kind of fits in. Of course, you write cards,
right,
this
right.
movie.
Right. It's like you're connecting, you're basically being someone else's love. You being involved in their relationship, but not able to have one of your own. There's so
Right.
much stuff. Yeah, this movie is brilliant, and I'm sure most people have seen it, but if folks haven't, highly recommend it. And if you have, definitely give it a rewatch. You'll be surprised how much of this holds up. I mean, I guess you could say too with everything we're dealing with now with AI and the
Yeah,
culture,
it has new
it's
meaning.
it actually kind of does because some of this stuff feels more potentially real. However, I
Hmm.
like that this movie could have easily, I think this movie was made today. It would have been more a comment on, oh, AI gone too far, and like, oh, look, you can't have
Yeah.
an AI be a real human. That's not the same thing as human connections. But this movie, you feel for the AI, like the Samantha character
Yeah.
that Scarlett Johansson is playing here, she goes through a lot of the same evolution as a human would. Like it's not trying to slag her off or say he's weird because this is just a computer. It's not a real relationship. It is a real relationship, and from both sides. And
Yeah.
that's what I think is so brilliant about this movie. And again, if done today, they would have left that part out, and it just would have been some, either condemnation on AI ruining human connections, or oh, you can't find a real connection or real love through an AI. I mean, this movie, that might be true. I'm not pro AI at all, but I think this movie doesn't take that path, and that's what makes it so special and so cool that she's going through the same things he is, even though she's not quote unquote real. But then what is real, and all that stuff
Yeah.
is floated in there too.
But that's the thing, right? Like the AI of it and the future world of it just happens to be. The movie is
Hmm.
about love and
Right.
relationships. And that to me is the best use of sci-fi, because anything else that you want to try to do in terms of commentary and such will not last, and it wouldn't be timeless, and you'll probably get too lost in that. But if you make it about what it's really about, then the rest of it sort of just has room to breathe, and you can interpret it in different ways, you know? So it's just so
Absolutely.
smart that way.
No, totally. And that's when great sci-fi, you encapsulate exactly what great science fiction can do when it's done right. It's
Yeah.
everything you just said, and this movie definitely does that. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.